Also, copies of the PowerPoint slides and a copy of the recording will be shared within the next week. Objectives of this session are to introduce the Office of Indian Economic Development, Division of Economic Development and Technical Assistance teams, share information about the National Tribal Broadband Grant, and be available to answer any questions you may have following the presentation. So next, I would like to turn it over to Dennis Wilson, Grants Management Specialist.
Good afternoon, everybody. I almost said good morning. Well, depending on where you're at, good morning. My name is Dennis Wilson. I'm the Grant Management Specialist for the Office of Indian Economic Development, Division of Economic Development. I facilitate and manage the NTPG grant program. I'm from Taos Pueblo, New Mexico, by way of Crow Agency, Montana. We're remote located here in Albuquerque, and I'm just about to start my 20th year of federal service, so I am getting a little long in the tooth. So we'll keep this pretty short and sweet. We'll roll through these slides, but first let's introduce those of us in the Division of Economic Development. Well, the OIED in general has two divisions: Division of Capital Investment and the Division of Economic Development, which is us. Next slide, please. So those within the Division of Economic Development were headed up by our OIED Director, Anna LeBeau. She will be remote located out of DC area soon. And Denise Litz, who had a conflict, or who is our branch chief for Division of Economic Development, and she is out of Denver, Colorado currently. Next slide, please. So within Denise's group, we're kind of split up into two teams: the Economic Development Specialist team and then the Grant Management team. So first, let's see who's with the Economic Development Specialist squad, which they deliver virtual presentations. They provide assistance and resources to non-awardee grant applicants. They're a great resource for any and all economic developments that we partner with and collaborate with other agencies. Next slide, please. Currently, we're spread out into DED zones. That's Division of Economic Development. Janelle Green manages the Alaska and Southwest zones, as you see by the red coloring there. And she's currently overseeing the Eastern zone, which we're going to be backfilling here pretty quick. And then Jim Henry manages the Northwest zone, and they're both currently remote located in California. So next slide, please. And then the grants team, myself, Dennis Wilson, and then Elizabeth Callahan. We are going to be managing most all of our 5 grant programs. This broadband and tourism are going to be the last offerings of the calendar year 22. So we're looking forward to that, to closing out the fiscal year and moving on to these. Next slide, please. And the Tribal Tech team, I can't thank them enough for putting this together, as well as everything else that they help us with and do our technical assistance. Christine Celentano, Elwood Pipestem Ott, McConnell Riley, they're spread out from Kansas all the way to Hawaii. So we're thankful that they're here with us and they're doing all the heavy lifting. Next slide, please. So let's get into the National Tribal Broadband Grant. This is the second offering, the second cohort. The first one was implemented in fiscal year 2021. So that one came to a close. There were some extensions. So now we're doing the new offering that's going to hopefully be awarded by the end of December, with the period of performance from January through the following December. So let's get into this, what the broadband grant does, who is eligible, and then we'll get into application portions of it. So the purpose of the grant like the last one, is to hire consultants to perform feasibility studies for the deployment and expansion of high-speed internet transmitted variously through DSL, cable modem, fiber, wireless, satellite, BPL. Any and all things broadband are open in this grant. It opened in August on the 17th, and it's going to close October 17th, that Monday. So you got a full good 2 months. Next slide, please. So what is the broadband grant going to help solve or help give direction for tribal determinations? It should hopefully improve the quality of life, spur economic development, commercial activity, create opportunities for self-employment, enhance resources, promote learning, law enforcement and emergency personnel needs, and allow the tribes to make informed decisions. Apart from all that, obviously, we're also trying to shrink the digital divide, make sure that tribal resources are utilized to their fullest extent, that we're connectivity, that e-commerce and everything is at its fullest and maxed usage. Next slide, please. So how the funding can be used: it can be used to assess current broadband services, if any, that are available in the applicant's community, engineering assessments, estimates of cost of building or expanding networks determined by the transmission medium, identification of potential funding or financing of the network, consideration of financial and practical risks associated with developing a broadband network. Again, any and all broadband needs that the tribe has identified that's going to be unique to them should be eligible for this grant. If you have any questions on that, we can talk about that one-on-one, but if it's anything broadband, this is the right place. Next slide, please. So feasibility studies, they should be contracted by those that have the pertinent data to speak to the relative market as the qualified SMEs, subject matter experts. Like anything, it's all in the data. So I hope that all the contractors, consultants are vetted to their fullest extent to make sure that they're providing the tribe what it needs, providing the tribe current market situations, climates, costs associated, especially as we're moving into, Build America, Buy America, all these different implementations that are going to be in the close future, making sure all of that is taken into account, that you're not kind of getting backed into the corner with proprietary software, hardware, etc. However, those that can perform these studies are not limited to, but examples of universities and colleges, private consulting firms, non-academic, nonprofit entities. The list is endless, so it is up to the tribe on who they're going to work with. But I would strongly suggest you take all that into account. Next slide, please. The eligibility of all of our grant programs, this is the most direct. It is only open to federally recognized Indian tribes per 87 FR 4636, which it's going to be updated in January. However, it is set for this year. So that makes things easier. Next slide, please. As far as eligibility, the pertinent information on the grant, CDFA, like most of our grants, is 15.032 economic development. The ceiling was greatly higher, 175,000. The floor is 100,000. There is no cost match requirement. We're going to award 15 to 27 depending. And unlike the last cohort, this is stretched to 24 months. So we're going to be talking about a 24-month period of performance. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the pertinent mandatory components of the application. Most of these you're going to find on grants.gov in the form of forms that you can fill out online. There is one that I want to circle back to later, but point out right now is the SF424 is listed as optional. That is an error. It is mandatory. So just be cognizant of that. It is not optional. but we'll go through these in turn and talk about them and just kind of point out the highlights of them and things that we've seen in best practices. Next slide, please. A cover page. It should list everything that was on a couple previous slides, everything from the CFDA, the title, the amount that's going to be requested, proper and full name, a statement confirming that it's going to be used for the intended goals and objectives, particularly for this grant program. And a few, 1, 2, 3 slides here that are of importance. One is that you have a full active registration in SAMS with the UEI, and that you, if you haven't worked with SAMS, that you fill out that vendor form to get that completed. Same thing with ASAP, where we're going to do the drawdowns and you're going to have the funds requested and get dispersed. It has to be a BIA ASAP. That takes some time. So if you do not have that, please let me know. We have the forms for that. You want to have that, both of those done prior to closing when you submit your application. Confirmation that all the other mandatory components have been identified, from the SF424 all the way down to travel resolution. And this is a key one, identification of key personnel. Please fill that out as many times as possible. Put all folks that are going to be providing oversight and management of the grant, from the tribal side to the consultant side if need be, and then identification of any partnerships or organizations and entities. Next slide. The cover letter. Please try to keep it to 1 page. It should just summarize the interests and the intent of the grant proposal, complete with authorized designated signature of the organizational leadership. And, provide that on, letterhead, official letterhead. Next slide, please. The project abstract summary. This is still kind of new for me with Grant Solutions. For those that have worked with it for a longer term, it may not be, but I know this is a kind of a cut and paste exercise, making sure you have the correct title, basic description. For the most part, just try to remain consistent with wording and titling and stuff like that through your application. It makes things a lot easier, but this is mandatory. It'll be in the form, so you'll see it. Next slide, please. The project narrative, we have it to please not exceed 15 pages. You're free to use addenda. You're free to use appendices if you need to, consolidate data and pictures and forms and put that in the back. You're free to do that. You should have a technical description of the project and explain how the study or we won't have a business plan, sorry, but the feasibility study will not duplicate any previous work, how it's outlined exactly what it's going to do with timelines, goals, objectives, what deliverables we come to expect from this. It's typically in that form of feasibility study, but how it's written and what the needs are going to be for the tribe, as well as speaking to the application criteria. It'd be great to have the resumes and qualifications of all identified personnel, as well as the organization. That way, you're going through the proper vetting and the responsibilities of the project personnel and the key personnel. You could use descriptive names, naming convention like below, even though you're going to be submitting them with grants.gov when we download them, it helps and it's in that form. So next slide, please. Makana is up.
Thanks, Dennis. Before we hand it off to Christine, let's just check in and see if anyone has any questions. You can put them into the chat. Right now, there's no questions. I just want to give a minute or so for anyone that has questions for all of that information that Dennis presented. And it's not, we'll have another opportunity for check-in questions. So if it's something that comes up later, no worries, we can kind of go back to this section that Dennis shared in terms of your questions. Okay, it looks like, yes, Paula, thank you. We will be sharing out the slide deck. It will be available on our website after the presentation, as well as a recording of this presentation webinar. Thanks, Paula. Okay, Christine.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to tackle some budget information. So maybe there'll be more questions here. So applicants are required to utilize the SF424A for the budget submission. Please use, again, a descriptive file name that includes the tribal name and the project description. And there is an example in the 5th bullet there. If you use this format for all your different required forms, it'll be really helpful to just keep track of all the pieces and parts of your application. The budget must identify the amount of grant funding requested and include a comprehensive breakdown of all projected and anticipated expenditures, including contracted personnel fees, consulting fees, hourly or fixed, travel costs, data collection and analysis costs, computer rentals, report generation, drafting, and advertising costs, and any other relevant project expenses and their subcomponents. Next slide, please. So the project budget is for the length of the project and has to be entered into the standard form SF424A. Applicants are required to submit both a line item budget and the budget narrative and identify the amount of grant funding requested and the project is entered on the budget information standard form SF424A, which can be found in the chat. So that's a direct link to the form and the most current version. So you'll be able to pick that up there if you don't know where it is already. It can also be found in grants.gov. When you go to just the general grants.gov, there's a forms tab, and you just hit the forms and you pick SF424 family, and you'll get the forms there as well. Next slide, please. The budget narrative. We have a few things we want to talk about here. So travel costs should be itemized by airfare, vehicle rental, lodging, and per diem based on the current federal government per diem schedule. Data collection and analysis costs should be itemized in sufficient detail for the OIED Division of Economic Development Review Committee to evaluate the charges. Personnel oversight, management, compensation, and associated costs of personnel who will be providing management oversight will not be indirectly charged. So do not include the personnel costs of consultants or contractors into this category. They'll be direct costs. For any position, provide the name of the individual, if known, their title, time commitment to the project in months, time commitment to the project as percentage or full-time equivalent, annual salary, grant salary, wage rates, etc. Identify the project director or principal investigator, if known at the time of the application. Costs of employee fringe benefits or allowances and services provided by employers to their employees, in addition to regular salaries and wages. Typically, fringe benefits amounts are determined by applying a calculated rate for a particular class of employee, full-time or part-time, for example, to the salary and wages requested. Fringe benefits like salary will also be a direct cost and include things like health insurance, FICA, federal taxes, retirement, etc. Other expenses may include computer rental, report generation, drafting costs, and advertising costs for a proposed project. Next slide, please. This is the SF424A, page 1. This is what it looks like. And the next 3 slides will cover what the 424A looks like. Many questions come in on these forms, so I'm going to go through them in a little bit of detail. It's more of a high-level overview, but I want to be able to provide some guidance on it. So specifically, this form should match number 18 in the SF424, which we'll look at in just a couple minutes, and your budget narrative. The highlighted area shows where to input the requested information, and this form is divided into 6 sections, lettered A through F. Section A is a high-level summary for the project budget. In column A, enter the program title associated with the CFDA or Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance number. In column B, you actually put the CFDA number itself in there. And then both pieces of information can be found in the notice of funding opportunity if you're wondering where they are or what they are. Column C and D are only filled out for a continuation request, so those will be blank. You can enter 0 in each of those columns. And then column E and F, you will enter the total amount of funding requested in column E and $0 in column F, as no match is required for tribal broadband. This form and SF424 and instructions on how to complete the forms can be found, as I mentioned earlier, in grants.gov. Next slide, please. So this is what page 2 of the SF424A looks like. Here in number 6, you will provide your budget line item requested amounts. In section A, lines A through F are a project's object class categories. Corresponding requested funding will be filled in the section B budget categories. In section B, personnel is project staffing you've identified in your project narrative and should match the staffing plan provided in the budget narrative. Fringe expenses are the cost of the benefits for the project staff. Travel is the itemized travel costs associated with your project. And where equipment and supplies are thought to be similar, equipment is considered a long-term asset and has a unit cost of $5,000 or more. Contractual is any cost for which you would have a written contract associated. Neither project-related construction nor indirect costs, so G and J, are allowed under the Tribal Broadband Program. Most project costs will fit into these categories provided. The other expense line items should only be used for project costs which do not fit into the categories A through F. Total direct charges will automatically populate in row I, and program income is not anticipated to come from this program directly for the National Tribal Broadband Grant Program. Next slide, please. This is page 3 of the SF424. And section D includes the forecasted cash needs for the proposed project. You'll fill in row 13 for quarters 1 through 4. And the total forecasted cash needs will auto-populate once all quarters are entered. And then you probably will not fill out section E. But if you have questions on that, they can be addressed. You can talk to Dennis about it, or you can get in touch with us. First year total should match section D number 13. And section F number 21 is the total of the federal direct charges and should match section B row I. Number 14 and number 22 will not be filled in, as indirect charges are not allowed for the National Tribal Broadband Grant Program. Next slide, please. So this year, grantees will be required to have 2 individuals who work directly on the project attend an in-person annual OIED, Division of Economic Development sponsored grantee 3-day meeting in Washington, D.C. during the year of the grant award, or years of the grant award. Applicant must include costs in the budget to cover this requirement. Travel costs must not exceed $6,000 per person. Next slide, please. Some important reminders for the budget narrative include remember to include a comprehensive breakdown of all projected expenditures, especially travel. That tends to get a little murky. So use federal government per diem rates and make sure you cover every aspect of the travel that you anticipate taking. Budget items must be necessary, relevant, and reasonable as they relate to the National Tribal Broadband Grant proposal. Anything found in the budget must directly tie back to an activity in the proposed project. So work to demonstrate and combine these 3 items to provide a budget narrative or justification for the proposed project expenditures. Next slide, please. This is about the application SF424. It's another federal form required. As Dennis said, it's not optional. And the most current version can be found in grants.gov, or we're going to actually post a link here for you so you can get right to it. So you're required to fill this out. Please use a descriptive file name like we've asked before, in that same kind of format. It really helps with tracking and keeping things together for your project application. And then the SF424 requires congressional district numbers of the applicant, which can be found at the link here on the slide and will also be placed into the chat. Next slide, please. So this is what the SF424 looks like. This is page 1. And the next 3 slides will show the whole of the SF424. The highlighted areas in the form are those that you'll be required to fill in. And number 1 on this particular form is the type of submission. And you would be clicking the second box down, which is application. Number 2 is the type of application, and that'll be new. So you'll click new. And number 8, please use a legal name of the applicant tribal organization. Don't put an individual name in there. Please use a legal name. And this will be used consistently by the Office of Indian Economic Development on forms and correspondence. So it's important to use the one that you associate with your legal name. And number 8B this is the employer identification number or tax ID number. And it's a 9-digit number assigned by the IRS and can take up to 5 weeks to acquire. So confirm this number as soon as possible. And number 8C is the UEI, or the unique entity identifying number. It's a 12-digit number and should take about 10 to 12 business days to acquire from sam.gov. And you can see it circled there on the form. You can see where that will go on the form. You'll enter the applicant organization address in 8D and 8F. This is the name of a contact for answering questions about an application and who will be overseeing the program. This does not necessarily and is not usually the same person who is legally responsible for authorizing the grant agreement. So keep that in mind. This isn't the authorizing representative from the tribe. This is who's the best contact on this application or who's overseeing the program. Next slide, please. This is page 2 of the SF424. And number 9, the type of applicant is a drop-down menu, and you'll choose the correct description of your organization. In this case, it'll be a tribe. And number 10, this should be pre-populated by the application package, but confirm it's correct and filled in with the agency you're applying to. So that would be the Department of Interior, Indian Economic Development. You should see that. Number 11 is requesting the CFDA number, which should be pre-populated. It's also found in the notice of funding opportunity, so you can verify that that's correct. And number 12, the funding opportunity number should pre-populate. However, the title may not pre-populate. So copy the program area details. In this case, National Tribal Broadband Grant would be the title. And number 13, this should pre-populate for the competition ID and title. And number 15, provide your organization's title for the proposed project. It's recommended to use a descriptive title that tells a little bit about the project as well. Next slide, please. On page 3 of the SF424, please list the counties where the project's located and the congressional district number where the project will be located. A list of congressional districts for that use a 2-character state abbreviation and a 3-character district number. An example is provided at the top right-hand corner of the sample form. If your service area will cross more than one congressional district, you're also able to identify these areas on the form. If you have a form from grants.gov and you hover over those gold sections, it actually gives you instructions. And in this case, we'll provide the link that's already been provided to you in the chat for finding out where your congressional district is. And that's it for budget. So next slide, please. I'm going to turn this over to Dennis to discuss key contacts. Dennis?
Thank you, Christine. That was great. Thanks for going through all those. They're vitally important. Key contacts. Please identify all of those contacts that are going to be instrumental in the management of the grant, the facilitation of the grant, your programmatic folks. Some do include the contractor consultants if they're taking those kind of roles. We want to make sure that we're able to, shotgun blast the grantee to make sure everyone is getting the pertinent information. If you have any kind of turnover, somebody's on leave, you never know if we have some drop reports or anything like that. So it's great that we have all that key contact information. And, we use that going forward for this cohort, especially if we have other things that happen, or we want to make sure everybody's aware of up and coming projects or other collaborations that we have. So, project matter contact information, make sure that the SAMS number used to identify is not expiring current UEI, ASAP. I'll get into that in another slide, kind of cover the make sure you get through the door items. So next slide, please. Questions so far?
That was a lot. Thank you, Christine and Dennis. There are not any questions in the chat that have come up in all of that budget presentation. But at any time, all of you who are participants can enter questions into the chat, and then we'll circle back to those questions when we have another questions break. So Dennis, you can continue, I think.
Thanks, Makana. Thanks for posting all those links in the chat. No, that's great. Evaluation criteria. So part of the process, before I get a little bit deeper into that, and we'll cover this, I think, on one of the last remaining slides, but make sure all your documents are consistently providing the same information. What's on the SF424 is the same on the 424A. Is the same in your budget spreadsheets. Whereas the SF424A kind of bulk some of that together. You want to explain your travel. Don't just put a travel amount, break that down. So, it shouldn't just say 6,000. It's probably going to come up to $5,748.52. Whatever that you've calculated for DC for those days, for those 2 people, everything needs to be broken down. If not, we're going to have to come hunt that down. We have to show that all the costs add up, tally up, and they are consistent across all documents. So please ensure that. Once you get through the door, once we, and we'll talk about that again, and once we get into the ranking phase of the process, we're going to be looking at the criteria that's been identified for this grant, which is a holdover from the last cohort, which is in 4 main group areas. The community impact potential at 55 points, project location in an opportunity zone, 15 points, need 20, and 10 authenticity. So next slide, please. We'll get into these and kind of break these down a little bit. Your application, I would speak directly to these criteria points. I think it would help. We want to see that the project is going to enhance the quality of life in the community. It could touch on creating educational and self-employment opportunities, benefit the applicants, residents, businesses, commercial activities, and it's going to benefit the most amount of folks in the community, as well as improve law enforcement and emergency operations. So it's unlimited as far as what you want to display as impact potential. But this is the biggest bulk of the point system. So I would spend a lot of time on this point. Next slide, please. Need. This criteria is going to focus on the applicant's lack of capacity to obtain a broadband feasibility study absent grant funding. This is going to be demonstrated in, if you don't get this grant, there is no way that you're good, or relatively no way that you can get the information to leadership, to tribal leadership, to make sure you're making the sound decisions on your broadband plans to get it to your communities. Demonstrate this. This is another big high point. I think it's the second highest point. So please don't leave any points on the table. Next slide, please. Opportunity zones. There should be a link in the NOFO as well as on grants.gov. And I have it as well. That should see if you are in these opportunity zones that have been identified. Just point this out. It opens the door to those that are economically distressed, communities where there's no new investments, the certain conditions, and they're eligible for preferential tax treatment. Most reservation communities are, but for those that can have identified opportunity zone, please point that out. By no means is it going to be the difference maker, I think, in the ranking panel. Most points are won or lost in that first big 50-point area, but this does add to it. So next slide should have the next and last criteria, authenticity. We just want to make sure that you are in concert with your consultant, as much as the consultant is probably going to provide a lot of the information that's in the application, especially their key contacts and their resumes and quals, but what they're going to provide. Still, we want to make sure that the tribe is working in concert with them and not just letting them run the show. So we should be able to flesh that out. And it's a kind of a maximum point is 10, so it's not very high, but all points are going to add up. So please, again, don't leave any points on the table. So those 4 criteria are which we're going to have the objective review panel rank these applications and move that towards the decision, which rests with our director, who has final say on all awarded grants. Next slide. Special notes, and this is where I kind of wanted to circle back. We want to make sure you get through the door. The business review of those that, when we close the door on October 17th, you got to make sure that you're a federally recognized tribe. You demonstrate that. It's obvious. Number 2, that you are registered in on SAMS.gov. That if I put in your UEI, it's going to come up. It's going to say active. That UEI is on the SF424. That if I go into ASAP on the next day, October 18th, and run a report on those that are registered, completely registered, that your tribe will be on there. So don't leave that to chance. Make sure you can check with the help desk on ASAP, BI ASAP, to make sure you are enrolled, which more than likely you probably are, but that's not always the case. You want to be insured and cover that base. You're going to have a recipient ID that's going to be identified, that we're going to be able to pull you up and disperse funds. We want to make sure you have the congressional district numbers on the SF424. Also, that your application includes a tribal resolution, current year, signed. If you have problems with that, let me know. Don't just not address it. That will not let you through the door. So not having any of these right here, and I saw question pop up in the chat. Yes, a trouble resolution is required. That you will not pass through the business review. You won't move to the ranking. We're going to be a little bit more stringent this year. I know the business review is a little non-consistent. So this year we're making that call. If you don't have these items, you will not be in the consideration. You're going to get an incomplete application notice. So next slide, please. Excuse me. So the NOFO is out. There's a link there. It should take you right to the solicitation on grants.gov. You should pull down the NOFO. We should just have the one NOFO, not a FOA that sometimes grants.gov kicks out. We do have that one document to make it easy. There's links to how to apply and how to register on grants.gov so you get notices on any updates, any synopsis changes, things like that, which hopefully we don't have. I've seen some inconsistencies in our NOFO and some outright mistakes, but hopefully it's not a game changer. It steers you the wrong way. Next slide, please.
We did have one question come up, Dennis, just for clarification. Is a travel resolution required for this grant?
Yes, it is. Again, if that's a difficulty, please let us know. Otherwise, it's going to be required.
Okay, I think that's the only question that came up. We can continue on.
Okay, and I think we're going to move towards a, well, let's talk the intake form. Obviously, we want to push getting the most help possible. Please get technical assistance through Tribal Tech. They're great. They'll help you with everything from pre-application planning through to closeout eventually. They're there to answer questions that sometimes I can't through conflict of interest. There's going to be a link there, if not, but yeah, and it's not just for this grant, it's for all 5 of our grants. So please take full advantage of them and get all the help that you need. And I think next is a survey that we're going to be doing. Makana, just thank you. She put it in the chat. So if everybody could take a second, I can't really award any prizes for this, but please fill this out. This helps us see where everyone's at. And I'm going to
It's pretty short too, so it'll only take everyone just a couple minutes.
Oops. That's nice. Hi, Paula. The question is, does a resolution need to entail anything specific? It should address that this grant is under the full approval of the council of the tribal leadership. So, you know, it doesn't have to be in full detail. I mean, it'd be helpful if you list the solicitation, the National Tribal Broadband Grant, the year, you know, whatever is the process for acquiring that, follow it. Otherwise, yeah, it should be specific. But again, if that's a problem, talk to me, let me know. Thanks. So in the same vein, broadband as a grant, as a federal aid program is one of the most collaborative currently that exists. We've kind of been mandated through a GAO national strategy needed to guide federal efforts to reduce the digital divide document that pretty much states that, well, through the Consolidated Appropriations Act, that NTIA is going to establish the Office of Internet Connectivity and Growth. So we're going to be working a lot in concert with the other programs. I know ours is small, but we're one of only 6 planning grants. So this is a great opportunity for those to not expend valuable tribal resource funds or other funds to acquire a feasibility study to see which direction you want to go. So as well as with Tribal Tech, asking us questions, please contact NTIA. Please get, and we'll have links to, where we think you can get the most information. Also link up with Broadband USA. They have a tribal broadband connectivity program. They also, NTIA has a federal broadband funding guide, which I think is great. And just recently, the Broadband USA issued a tribal broadband planning toolkit. I think that was just a few days ago. So you have all these resources out there to help you come up to speed, see, and no pun intended, see which way you want to go. It'll help with finding consultants, finding those when you start going through all these different steps with when you start building, when you start fleshing out, working through the middle miles, doing all of that work. They're a great resource. I also want to put a plug in for next week, Tuesday. It's the last of the DOI's Tribal Broadband Summit. We'll be presenting this, our grant there as well, but it's a chance to network, to get ahead with some of the industry experts. It blows your mind with how much is out there. I know there's just so much and it's moving so fast. Again, no pun intended. So next slide, please. So we're bringing this to an end. I want to personally thank everyone involved, our team, the DED team, our economic development specialists. They're available. Elizabeth and I are going to be the points of contact for this grant. Please utilize Tribal Tech. These 3 are wonderful. We work with them side by side. If we could provide any other additional links to the other federal aid programs, those that we're going to be kind of seaming up, that way there's no gaps or overlaps going forward. So this grant is going to be a 2-year grant. We're going to close in October. We're going to award probably December with a starting date in January. So this grant is wrapped up for the next 2 years. Unless we get additional funding, we won't have a cohort next year. This will be it. So again, try to go through these slides, check every box you have, make sure you get through the door, make sure everything's consistent. We're available. All of us are here if you need any help. And we look forward. We only got a month. It's going to go quick. So thank you. And I'll turn it over to Christine.
Thanks, Dennis. I just want to let everyone know that there were 2 additional links posted in the chat for the National Tribal Broadband Summit in that next week's meeting that Dennis talked about, and then also for the Broadband USA. So that's where the resources are that Dennis was referring to, and hopefully you've all gotten a lot out of this. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us at the intake form link and we can answer your questions. And if we can't, we'll find someone who can. And thanks to Dennis and to my team for getting this all together. So thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.